Birth, bloodline, and the Gaunt family. To understand Voldemort, you have to start with the Gaunts. They were once a proud wizarding family, direct descendants of Salazar Slytherin himself. But by the time Merope Gaunt, Voldemort's mother, was born, that bloodline was all but decayed. The Gaunts had clung so tightly to the idea of pure blood that generations of inbreeding had left them unstable, violent, and obsessed with their own status. Their rundown shack near Little Hangleton wasn't the home of an ancient and noble line, but a crumbling reminder of how arrogance and isolation can rot a family from the inside. Merope grew up in that environment, mistreated by her father, Marvolo, and overshadowed by her brother, Morphin. But she carried one thing her family prized, a direct link back to Slytherin. Her life changed when she became infatuated with Tom Riddle Sr., a handsome and wealthy muggle who lived nearby. With no hope of gaining his affection naturally, Merope resorted to magic. She dosed him with a love potion, drawing him into a marriage built entirely on deception. From that union came Tom Marvolo Riddle, born on December 31st, 1926. The birth itself was tragic. Merope, drained of strength and abandoned once the potion's effects wore off, died shortly after delivering her son in a London orphanage. That moment shaped everything that followed. Voldemort entered the world motherless, fatherless in all but name, and burdened with the fractured legacy of two families, one noble and cursed, the other wealthy but ordinary and despised. Orphanage childhood. Tom Riddle's earliest years were spent in the Wolves Orphanage, a cold, grey place where children were given the bare minimum of care and affection. For most kids, this might have meant a lonely life, but Tom wasn't like the others. From a young age, he knew he was different, and he made sure everyone else knew it too. He was clever, but there was a darker edge to his intelligence. Tom manipulated the staff with practiced charm when he needed something, yet behind their backs he was feared. The other children whispered about strange things happening when Tom was angry. A rabbit once found hanging dead in its hutch, bullies who cornered him suddenly terrified by something they couldn't explain, and two orphans who returned from a trip to a seaside cave, shaken and silent after Tom had lured them there. What stood out wasn't just that Tom had magic before Hogwarts. Other young witches and wizards did too. It was how he used it. Where most children's magic bursts out accidentally in fear or excitement, Tom's was deliberate. He experimented, pushed boundaries, and took satisfaction in making others squirm. Power fascinated him, and cruelty came naturally. It was also here in the orphanage that Tom first tasted the sting of abandonment. He never knew his parents, but he knew enough to hate them. A muggle father who wanted nothing to do with him, and a mother too weak to live. That resentment festered, hardening into a philosophy that he would carry for the rest of his life. Weakness is unforgivable, and love is an illusion. So by the time Albus Dumbledore arrived at the orphanage to deliver Tom's Hogwarts letter, the boy was already well on his way to becoming something darker. He wasn't just a gifted child waiting for guidance. He was a predator learning how to sharpen his claws. Hogwarts. When Tom Riddle stepped through the doors of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, it was like a caged predator finally let loose in the wild. For the first time, he wasn't confined by the grey walls of the orphanage. He had books, spells, a wand, and endless opportunities to test himself. Hogwarts was everything he had dreamed of, and Tom took it with a frightening intensity. The Sorting Hat barely hesitated before placing him in Slytherin House, a natural match given his cunning, ambition, and the bloodline he carried. To his professors, Tom was the model student. He was polite, charming, and impossibly gifted. Teachers praised him, classmates admired him, and by his later years he wore the prefect badge and eventually became head boy. On the surface, Tom Riddle was every parent's dream, handsome, brilliant, and destined for greatness. But beneath that polished exterior, the same cruel streak from the orphanage still burned. Tom wasn't content to simply learn magic. He wanted to master it, bend it, and use it to dominate others. Hogwarts also gave him access to its deepest secrets. He became fascinated with Salazar Slytherin's legend, digging into rumours of a hidden chamber and a monster that could purge the school of Muggle-born students. By the age of 16, Tom uncovered what even adult wizards had dismissed as a myth. He found the Chamber of Secrets and claimed control of the basilisk within. The attacks that followed weren't just about blood purity, they were Tom's first real taste of fear as a weapon. When a student, Myrtle Warren, was killed, the school nearly shut down, but Tom was too clever to be caught. He framed his uncle, Morphin Gaunt, for the crime and closed the chamber, leaving behind a trail of whispers while preserving his spotless reputation. What's striking about these years is how perfectly Tom balanced two lives. To his professors, he was brilliance personified. To the shadows of Hogwarts, he was already the beginning of something darker, a boy who could unleash a monster on innocent students and still walk away with honours pinned to his chest. The birth of Voldemort. For Tom, the name Riddle carried too much weight. It tied him to a muggle father who abandoned him and an orphanage that had marked his childhood with shame. Even his first name felt like a curse, the last thing his dying mother gave him before she left him to a life of resentment. Tom didn't want to inherit his past. He wanted to erase it. So, he remade himself. He took the letters of Tom Marvolo Riddle and rearranged them into something new, something grand. I am Lord Voldemort. It wasn't just a name change, it was a rebirth. Voldemort carried the cadence of power and mystery. It stripped away weakness and tied him to no one but himself. He was no longer the unwanted boy at Wool's orphanage. He was the heir of Slytherin, the rightful master of magic, and the future ruler of the wizarding world. This was also when his ideology sharpened. On one side, Tom cultivated the idea of blood purity, railing against Muggle-borns as inferior and dangerous. The irony, of course, was that he himself was half-blood, something he loathed so deeply that he tried to erase all traces of it. On the other side, he became obsessed with immortality. Death, to Tom, was the ultimate weakness, and he refused to accept it. Every choice he made from this point forward, every experiment with dark magic, every secret ritual was about escaping mortality and building a legacy that could never die. From here on, the boy who once toyed with rabbits and frightened children in a seaside cave was gone. In his place stood someone who believed he was destined for dominance. Horcruxes. By the time Tom Riddle became Voldemort, brilliance and ambition alone weren't enough for him. Power, after all, is fragile if it ends with death, and Voldemort feared death more than anything else. That fear wasn't abstract, it was born out of his own childhood. He had seen how easily life could slip away, watching his mother die the moment he entered the world. He felt the sting of abandonment from his father, who was alive but might as well have been a ghost. To Voldemort, death wasn't natural, it was betrayal, and he swore he would never fall victim to it. That obsession led him to the darkest form of magic a wizard could explore, Horcruxes. The theory fascinated him while still a student, but it was in his later years that he began to act on it. A Horcrux required two things, a murder to tear the soul and a ritual to bind that fragment into an object. It wasn't enough for Voldemort to cheat death once. He wanted to go further than any wizard before him, scattering his soul so widely that he would become untouchable. When Voldemort pried the truth about Horcruxes from Horace Slughorn, not the whole story, just enough, it confirmed what he already suspected. The soul could be split multiple times, and where others saw something monstrous, Voldemort saw opportunity. To him, morality was weakness, and the soul was just another tool. Every life he took became fuel for his own survival. The more he fractured himself, the less human he became, in appearance and in spirit. But Voldemort didn't care. Humanity meant vulnerability. To him, sacrificing it was the cost of greatness. His very name was meant to live forever. Horcruxes were the machinery that would make that promise unbreakable. But Voldemort didn't create Horcruxes randomly. Each one carried meaning, tied to his hunger for legacy and symbolism. Objects weren't just vessels to him. They were trophies, anchors of history that reflected the grandeur he believed he deserved. The first was perhaps the simplest, Tom Riddle's diary. At face value, it was just a blank book, but it represented his brilliance as a student and his ability to manipulate others. Through it, he could possess Ginny Weasley decades later and reopen the Chamber of Secrets, proving that even a memory of him could inspire terror. The Gaunt ring came next, a direct link to his family line and Slytherin's blood. More than that, the ring housed the Resurrection Stone, though Voldemort never cared for its intended purpose. To him, the ring was a trophy of conquest, stolen from his uncle Morphin after framing him for murder. Then came Slytherin's locket, once belonging to Salazar Slytherin himself. Stealing it from Hepzibah Smith wasn't just an act of theft, it was Voldemort taking hold of his claimed birthright, proof that he was the true heir of Slytherin. From there, he turned his sights on other founders. Hufflepuff's cup, another heirloom of a Hogwarts founder, symbolised his desire to possess the very roots of the magical world. When locked away in Gringotts, it was less about safety and more about grandeur. His Horcrux sat hidden beneath the world's strongest bank, daring anyone to try and touch it. Ravenclaw's diadem continued the theme. Lost for centuries, it was said to bestow wisdom on the wearer. For Voldemort, finding it and twisting it into a Horcrux was the ultimate act of arrogance. He didn't seek wisdom, only domination, yet he even claimed Ravenclaw's prize for himself. Later in his life, Voldemort made Nagini a living Horcrux. The snake wasn't just a companion, she was a weapon and a protector. In many ways, Nagini became his most personal Horcrux, always by his side, embodying the serpentine image he had crafted for himself. And finally, there was the unintended Horcrux, Harry Potter. When Voldemort tried to kill the infant boy, the curse rebounded, and a fragment of his soul latched onto the very child who had become his greatest enemy. It was an accident, a flaw in his perfect plan, and the one mistake that ultimately unravelled everything. Together, these Horcruxes were more than safeguards. They were symbols of who Voldemort believed he was, an heir, a conqueror, and an immortal. But in scattering his soul, he also scattered his humanity, until the man once called Tom Riddle was nothing more than a shadow stretched too thin. Losing humanity. Each time Voldemort tore his soul apart, the change wasn't just internal, it showed on the outside. In his early years, he was strikingly handsome, dark hair, sharp features, and an easy charm that made people underestimate the danger beneath. But by the time he began creating Horcruxes, something shifted. The first changes were subtle. His skin paled, his eyes grew colder, and there was a strange, unsettling quality about him. Something people couldn't quite name, but felt in their bones. As he pushed further into dark magic, the humanity in his face melted away. His nose flattened into snake-like slits, his skin stretched thin and waxy, and his eyes burned red. He no longer looked like Tom Riddle, and that was by design. To Voldemort, appearance meant nothing if it brought him power. His inhuman features were not a curse, but a badge of triumph. The cost of immortality was his humanity, and he paid it gladly. To others, though, it was horrifying. His new form inspired fear before he even spoke. Just to look at him was to know something unnatural stood in front of you. Ruin, temporary defeat, and return. By the 1970s and into the early 80s, Voldemort had become the most feared wizard alive. His Death Eaters spread terror across Britain, entire families lived in hiding, and even saying his name was avoided. It seemed inevitable that he would conquer the wizarding world. But then came a prophecy, one that spoke of a child with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord. Convinced it meant Harry Potter, Voldemort sought to kill the boy before the prophecy could come true. What he didn't anticipate was a force he didn't understand and had long dismissed: love. Lily Potter's sacrifice created a shield of protection so strong that Voldemort's killing curse rebounded, striking him instead. That single moment unravelled everything. His body was destroyed, his soul shattered beyond what even Horcruxes could fully protect. He became less than a ghost, surviving only as a wisp clinging to the edges of life. The wizarding world rejoiced. The Dark Lord was gone, defeated by a baby. For more than a decade, Voldemort drifted in that half-existence, feeding off snake venom, unicorn blood, and attaching himself to weak hosts. But his will never broke. Through followers like Peter Pettigrew and rituals fueled by dark magic, he clawed his way back. In Goblet of Fire, the ritual of bone, flesh, and blood rebuilt his body and restored his power. Once again, he walked the earth in physical form, and with him returned the terror of his first reign. Final defeat. Voldemort's second rise was swift, but it carried the same flaw that doomed him the first time. his arrogance. While he gathered Death Eaters, infiltrated the Ministry, and waged war on Hogwarts, he never stopped underestimating the very forces that opposed him. He dismissed love as weakness, underestimated loyalty, and ignored the possibility that the boy he had marked as his equal could truly outwit him. As Harry, Ron, and Hermione systematically destroyed his Horcruxes, Voldemort's immortality unravelled piece by piece. Nagini's death at Neville's hand severed his last safeguard. In the final duel at Hogwarts, Voldemort launched the killing curse one last time, certain of his victory. But his wand, the Elder Wand, refused to kill its true master. The curse rebounded, and Voldemort fell by his own hand, his soul ripped apart until nothing remained. What lingered after his death wasn't the glory he imagined, but a cautionary tale. Voldemort became the embodiment of how obsession with control, fear of death, and rejection of humanity can consume a person entirely. And in the end, the boy who once called himself Tom Riddle achieved the opposite of what he wanted most. He did not live forever, but the memory of his terror ensures he will never truly be forgotten.